Thank you so much for joining us. Hello, everyone. Do let us know from where in the world you are joining us. Hello, Luke. There's Chris Thompson.
Hi, Chris.
Who we all know. Yes. Hello, we are here.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, the communication's a bit wobbly. Had a bit of UFO interference earlier.
It's setting out. So do let us know where in the world you're joining us from. Count Ducky, I think you've got the wrong show there.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome along, folks. I am Jamie Anderson. People are clearly very excited about this UFO comic anthology from Matt's reaction there. Luke's in Belgium. Count Ducky is in London. I don't know what he's on about with the wigs there. Obviously, this is Shadow Issue uniform. Right, hello everyone. So look, we are talking tonight about UFO, the Comic Anthology Volume 1. And very kindly, I'm joined by John Freeman. Perhaps we should just very briefly discuss the purple wigs, John, and maybe get rid of them. We hope you appreciate the effort we went to actually getting our own moon-based outfits.
At least Jamie combed his, which is more than I did. So my suggestion, jokingly, I said to Jamie, what are you going to wear a purple wig? And I got one in the post the next day. So here we go. But
let's remove the purple wig, John, because this is actually
otherwise nobody will take this publishing decision seriously.
They might not. We have still got matching hairdos without the wigs, though.
Yeah.
So, folks, welcome along. I can see people joining us from Ireland, Scotland, Pittsburgh in the US, from Germany.
Wow, it's great. This is great.
Elstree, let's open the studios. London. James Baylis says, keep the wigs. James, I'm not sure that we can manage that. They are quite itchy. From Italy there.
Oh, wow. Well, Italy, big fans of UFO there.
Absolutely. Canada too. Grimsby, probably the most glamorous we've heard so far. Anyway, folks, look, thanks for joining us. I'm Jamie Anderson, MD of Anderson Entertainment and Gerry's son. And this is John Freeman. John, do you want to introduce yourself in a few words and let these lovely people know who you are?
I know who you are. A magazine and comics editor, and I run Down the Tubes, a British comics website, which is generally about both vintage and modern British comics. That's on my RISP.
Yes.
But yeah, I've been editing and publishing comics for about 30 years now plus.
So are we fair in calling you the expert?
Well, yeah, I would prefer that if we're going to go for experts, we go with the person who's put the UFO anthology together, which is Shakila Visconti, who has done an absolutely fantastic job. I mean, it's looking really good. So I'm really excited about this. I mean, more to the point, I'm more excited about the fact that this is the first time we've ever had a UFO comics collection with some great names lined up in it in terms of artists. John Davis, who kicked it off, wonderful. John Davis, MBE, better known for his children's illustration, and Gerry Haylock and Brian Lewis. So we've got some terrific artists involved, and great stories too. You know, I always regarded in some ways UFO as being like UFO in Countdown and TV Action has been like series 2 we never had of UFO to a certain extent. I mean, they're not all great stories, but some of them are fantastic, especially when Paul Foster gets carted off to the alien planet and we see more of the aliens.
Oh, what story is that of interest? I want to see if that is in volume 1 or not. Do you know the name of it?
Yeah, I think it's cool. Off the top of my head, now you see, you're asking me to be an expert. It's Abducted, I believe. I mean, they.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that's in volume 1. That might be in volume 2. Anyway, we'll have a look at it later. But yeah, it is amazing stuff. Now, we will be joined shortly by a huge fan of Countdown and all the UFO strips, Nick Briggs, who I can see waiting. He's waiting in the wings. He's eager to be involved. He's just given me a thumbs up, which you can't see. But he'll be joining us very shortly to give his perspective on the sort of nostalgic stuff. But just for some context, John, for those who don't necessarily know Countdown or even those that remember it, just give us some context for that.
Okay, yeah, well, Countdown was the sort of like the follow-on from TV 21. I mean, TV Century 1, of course, is the Gerry Anderson comic that, thank you, Chris, very definitely the comic that everybody associates most with Gerry Anderson and Sylvia Anderson's TV shows. because of Frank Bellamy's Thunderbirds more than anything else, and then the follow-on Captain Scarlet, but Ron Embleton's Stingray and Mike Noble's Fireball XL5. But by the early 1970s, obviously TV21 had lost its license to publish Gerry Anderson strips, and Alan Fennell, funnily enough, who was the editor of TV21, carried on with Countdown. And Countdown was sort of like, unfortunately, it was mistimed in many ways, because if you remember buying Countdown in the 1970s, as I did, and it was one of my first comics that I bought as somebody who actually went out and bought it rather than having it bought for me, it came at a point where science fiction was sort of like went off air in many ways in the early 1970s. There wasn't as much of it around. And sadly, although there was still great fondness for, Thunderbirds and obviously for UFO, which they hope would be the driving force of the comic, the TV had moved more towards action adventure, and that's acknowledged in the final issue of Countdown before it becomes TV action, Countdown and TV action. So it was a very, it was of its time, but it was a great comic. I mean, I love all the strips in it, but unfortunately, it wasn't at the right time. I mean, if it happened like 5 years later when we had 2000 AD, and then we have Star Wars, then perhaps it would still be around. But
wow, so just a bit of unfortunate timing there. I'm going to welcome in Nick, because I can see he's getting excited at every mention of the word Countdown. There is Nick Briggs.
I didn't have a wig, so I thought I'd wear a hat instead.
How could you not have a wig? I mean, you've got more access to props than either of us.
I know, but I didn't get a purple wig. But I can reveal that I do have the same haircut as you two.
Excellent.
We've gone for the Baldy shadow uniform.
It's very bright in here. Sorry about that. I'm bleached out.
Beautifully overexposed.
I'm like a featured panel from a Countdown strip, where they used to do that blasted up.
Yeah, you are. You're that guy from Countdown, the Countdown story written by John M. Burns with the dropped-in MGM 2001 models.
Absolutely, yes, all the hardware from 2001.
You're totally
sorry, Jamie.
As always, it's absolutely fine. Please keep reminiscing. But I'd like you to reminisce.
This was about UFO, and now we've switched over to the Countdown strip, which is
exactly
one of those, as you will know, Jamie, one of those nightmare licenses. So, but hopefully, it is actually being looked at by another party. But we won't plug them. We want to plug the UFO Comics Anthology.
Yeah, stay on topic, John. Yeah. So, Nick, when I mentioned Countdown to you initially that we were doing this, you got all sort of nostalgic and
all unnecessary.
Yeah, you did. So why is Countdown such an important part of your growing up?
Well, I think John and I are of similar ages, and I certainly think I didn't go out and buy Countdown myself, but it was ordered for me by my parents, and I would get it delivered every week. I remember there was an advertising campaign for it on television. And I think it was called Countdown to TV Action. And then later, when that process happened that John was mentioning, where action and adventure and crime series became more popular on television, it was then called TV Action with Countdown, and then later just became TV Action when it late. And I wish I've got loads of them in those boxes behind me. Not all of them are filled with Countdown and TV Action, but I just grabbed a few that I'd got out recently for Doctor Who stuff. And when it finally became just TV Action, and they did these big, full story strips, you can see I wanted to make this a Doctor Who comic, so I scratched out UFO at the top. Seems rather vicious, doesn't it? But these are the various big Doctor Who stories they did, and that's the thing. I think that because science fiction became less prevalent on television, Doctor Who bucked the trend really, and was the only sci-fi series left in TV Action by the end. But yeah, it was, to me, as I've said to you often, Jamie, for me, the Doctor Who strip was very much Doctor Who. I felt, it was the Doctor Who I got while Doctor Who wasn't on air. And the same thing, just as John said, with the UFO, nowadays fans make judgments about spin-off merchandise material about whether it's official or not. That never entered my head. It said it was UFO, so I believed it was UFO, and it was just as valid to me as the TV series. Well, how many artists did they have working on it over the years, John?
Several, but the ones that people remember are John Davis, Brian Lewis, Gerry Haylock. They're the ones, and John M. Burns, of course, who takes over later. I mean, yeah, I'm afraid that you're talking about scratching out your UFO from the cover. I'm afraid that's the only bit. I'm afraid it went worse than that. I actually cut it up. So I'm going mirror here. So I'm horrifying any collectors who are watching now, because that's the only surviving bits of Countdown that I have. Or originally, obviously, I've got copies elsewhere in the house, but yes, I'm afraid that.
Yeah.
It's just
but the thing I wanted to like these complete Doctor Who stories, I wanted to turn them into books. I was obviously some kind of proto publisher, crazy, isn't it? But yeah, they're beautifully drawn. And Gerry Haylock was famous for doing loved for doing the Doctor Who strip as well. He had a very
he also drew Down There and many other things down the line.
They're incredibly prolific artists, weren't they?
Yeah, they were very, very busy. I mean, obviously, Gerry Haylock shared a studio with Harry Linfield for many years, if anybody who reads who knows their Doctor Who history of comics will know. And that's so. Although Harry Linfield never worked on UFO, which is Shaki was very keen to point out to me a couple of days ago, and thank you for that, because that's why we need that kind of expert on the case. But they shared a studio, and that's how they got the work together on that. As I understand it, anyway, from my reading of magazines.
And did they do, as is obvious from the Doctor Who strip, with Doctor Who, they clearly took photographs of the program while it was being broadcast? Because I often watch old John Pertwee stories, and he'll just pause for a moment, and then I think that's the Gerry Haylock frame right there. He took a photograph of that. Well, they're not publicity stills, and I wonder whether they did that with UFO as well.
Well, they wouldn't have had access to video, and if they were doing it and they knew they were doing it, they'd have to set up a camera and take photographs as it was being broadcast.
Yeah, I think that's what they must have done. Yeah,
in this day and age, actors would have access to, artists would have access to many, to video, and to, they can pause stuff on YouTube and that sort of thing. And if you want to find any Doctor Who picture, you can find it pretty quickly online. And the same. But I suspect that the ITC shows there were a lot more photographs available, unlike poor Mike Noble, who was assigned to draw Star Trek, and Harry Linfield was drawn to draw Star Trek for Joe 90 Top Secret, where it was quite clear they had very little knowledge of what Star Trek was about, including the USS Enterprise able to land on the planets.
Yes.
So I tend to think there was a lot more information available to the artists about UFO. Because Alan Fennell was obviously well connected with Gerry and would have had access to the sets and that sort of thing.
It seemed very accurate. It did. Yeah.
I mean, when I was editing, in a previous lifetime, as Nick knows, I edited Doctor Who magazine. So I actually, my period was Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred, the Seventh Doctor and Ace. And I went out onto the sets a couple of times to take photographs specifically of Sylvester, partly because he was such a bugger for some artists to capture. But just so there was extra material that people hadn't seen several times, going, oh yeah, as Nick just said, spotting an obvious publicity shot. But you can see the publicity shots, and in fact, Countdown did the same thing, because there's certainly on Doctor Who, because there's an early Doctor Who story which was taken from photographs that were taken with Alan on set with John Pertwee when they were shooting the Damons. There's a fake,
that all those photographs exist, presumably. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely see, and I just wonder whether it was the same for UFO. You can definitely see moments in this series where characters don't move for a while, where they thought this will, they immediately took photos because they weren't moving.
Yeah, I mean, but as I said, there must have been lots of photographs from UFO, because the UFO annual, which is the first UFO annual, which doesn't include any comic strip, must have been prepared like some 6 months before the show was even broadcast, I suspect. Right. And there were plenty of photographs in that. So
interesting.
Gents, for you both, how closely do you think those UFO strips in Countdown and eventually TV Action resembled the series? John, you said to me something along the lines of it felt like the second series that never happened, because sometimes those comic strips go a little bit away from television canon to the point where they don't feel quite so familiar. What do you both think on that?
Well, generally, licensed comics tend to be very strictly observed. Tend to be these days there's quite strict controls over what you can and can't do in a comic, and a production office on a show like Doctor Who or any other show will have more control over what you can and can't do in a comic that is licensed from a TV show. But I think back then, I mean, if you look at, again, you look at TV21 and you look at Countdown, there was a lot more freedom to do anything. And I don't think there was the production offices really had that much of involvement. Although we know from records that obviously Gerry was very keen on, when they were set up TV21 and Lady Penelope, they were very keen on continuing the brand out into comics. I think they pretty much trusted Alan Fenner to get on with it. And for me, as I said, some of the stories, not all of the stories, but some of the UFO stories are you feel like they're a continuation of UFO as it was meant to be after the show walked off into the sunset after that first series. And I always wondered if Fenner would have been given access to some of the plots they were considering for the second season to make it more interesting. But I'm speculating here, I hasten to add. So
that's juicy speculation, isn't it? Very juicy.
Yeah, we like that sort of speculation here.
Yeah, but as I say, for me, it said UFO. So in those days, and I was, how old would I have been? From 10 upwards, kind of thing. So you just believed that stuff. You didn't sort of. I mean, interestingly, I suppose when I looked at Star Trek comics, I was quite confused. And I don't mean the ones you were referring to. I mean, the American Star Trek comics are very poor in their resemblance of the TV series. Sulu is pulling huge levers and things on his console, and it vaguely resembles the TV series, which makes it all the more interesting in a bizarre way. But yeah, I mean, the UFO stuff, I remember it as being all the craft were exactly the same and the settings looked the same. Yeah. And I think, can I ask, was it the case that the artists wrote the scripts, or was someone else writing?
No, it would have been. We don't know generally. I mean, Shaki has actually credited in some of his documentations who the writers are. Oh, right, I haven't got that to hand, but I think he's managed to work out who some of the writers are probably. But generally,
have you spoken about Shaki's role on this project in case people are
only light touch? I guess now is a good time, actually, John. So tell us who is Shaki and what's Shaki's involvement.
Shaki. I first came across Shaki's work through his wonderful and sadly at the moment extinct complete history of Gerry Anderson Comics, which was an incredible website. Which, if you dig around the Internet Archive on their Wayback Machine, you can find sort of like partial copies of it. But it is a tremendous. It was a tremendous piece of work and a hugely detailed history of every single Gerry Anderson related comic, and he managed to interview people who are now sadly, some of whom are sadly no longer with us, and has now put together all the background material and the strips, scanning all the strips for the first volume of this series, and it, from what Jamie is sort of like on the QT show me, it looks absolutely fantastic. So
yeah, huge amount of credit to Shaki for that. No way we could have done it without Shaki. Incredible amount of work. Making sure not only that all the artwork is presented in its best possible way, but also providing tons and tons of articles and all sorts of good stuff like that. Would you like to see some artwork and some pages, perhaps? I think we probably shouldn't we?
Yes. I'm really excited. I'm so excited to get this when it's finally out. I seriously am.
Thank you, Nick. We'll send you that 10 quid in the post. So
I'd rather you just sent me the book, frankly.
Okay, fine. We'll send you the book. So it's a hardback presentation, 288 pages in volume 1, and it will be printed litho, not digital. So it will be the best possible print quality. It will be a lovely thing. And as you'll see from the inside cover page, it is volume 1 of 2. Volume 1 is available for pre-order from this Friday and will be shipping at the end of November. Volume 2 will be out sometime around March, April, something like that. And we've got a real split of color and black and white strips. And John, just as I flicked through some of these, it changed formats quite a lot, didn't it? The strips from...
Yeah, it would depend on where it was positioned. Yeah, I mean, Countdown did vary, which strips got into the center pages and things like that, according to popularity and according to, but they would plan it quite way in advance. But it's just great. It's just like 1970s bonkers. But towards the end of the 1970s, I mean, Looking was being told to sort of like have all their panels exactly the same size and stuff like that, and it's just pales into comparison with this.
So that was the center one, was it? Because it goes right across, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The snatch.
Whereas you've also got single page ones, and it's all been laid out in the best possible way to create a kind of nice flow, and that where there are spreads, that we're not losing stuff in the gutter too much, all that kind of stuff. So again, Shaki heading that up, making sure it's presented beautifully. But Shaki has also written a bunch of really fascinating articles throughout, so it isn't just a reproduction of the strips on their own, but things like the history of Countdown.
Oh, brilliant.
How it came about, things like artist profiles.
Look, there's that cover I was holding up.
Exactly the same one. There you go. All sorts of bits and pieces, and also how closely, in fact, as we've just been talking about there, the comics mirrored the show. And you can see some select screen grabs and frames and stuff there, which start to showcase it. So it's
brilliant.
It is a really beautiful collection, and actually, I was just flicking through the proofs with John before this, and there's so much content there, and that's only volume 1 or 2.
Yeah, well, the great thing about this is that I mean, obviously, it's wonderful that Thunderbirds and Stingray has been reshared for different generations. People who remember Thunderbirds from the 1990s, even though it began in, the series itself was first shown in the 60s. But for a lot of people, it's the Blue Peter Tracy Island that people, many younger fans will remember. And I say younger, the 1990s isn't that, it's quite old now. But it's UFO, apart from the few strips that appeared in the wonderful Reynolds and Hearns book, that there isn't that, it hasn't been reprinted. So other than through I'm not sure whether there were any collections. I think there were some material in Italy, but whether it was the Countdown material, I don't know. I'm sure one of the Italian watchers of this book presentation can come straight back. But yeah, it's great fun. It's great to see it all collected, and I hope that the sales bode well, and it will lead to other collections as well, which I'm sure must be under consideration, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we would love to know what other titles you would like to see. As John said, other things like Thunderbirds and Stingray have been reprinted in various ways, and partially and in never quite complete, I guess, John. They've always all been split up a little bit, but
yeah, there are. Obviously, with again, TV21 is another one that's had the issues where you've got, in terms of quality of reproduction. But that's not to say if you've got a decent set of TV21s, in the same way when I was working on the Down There books for Titan, because I was involved in that. I mean, if you can get decent copies of the comic strips, then you can get the best reproduction possible. I mean, the film and the artwork is, the film which TV21 and the Dutch version, the TV 2000 was printed on, has long gone into the skips, and sadly there's not a huge amount of artwork out there to work from. And what there is, in some ways it's great that there is artwork out there, but I remember we were discussing one project where we were offered the pages of an Eagle strip, and that was great, but unfortunately some of it had been exhibited, so the colors had faded and things like that.
Yes.
And balloons had dropped off. I mean, I've got pages of my favorite Martian from TV21, or I facilitated the scanning of those at one point. So and I noticed balloons would drop off quite.
You don't want your balloons dropping off, do you?
Absolutely, it's the worst thing possible. I mean, for people who don't know comic strip production, I mean, artwork used to be physical and no longer is. So these days the lettering is a layer on top of the art of a digital art for most people. I mean, there are still artists who obviously prefer to draw on physical board, but I mean, all of these strips were drawn physically, and they are fragile artifacts now.
Yeah, and difficult to come by. I mean, this is majority reproduction, although carefully restored wherever possible and sort of rebuilt. And Shaki has done an amazing job overseeing that, sourcing everything, scanning it at the highest possible resolution.
And Jamie, inevitably, you've got to have that balance between what the hardcore fandom might want out of a collection, and the commercial realities of the cost of actually putting the book together. And from my own experience, again, of working on strips like Charlie's War for Titan and Down Dare and things like that, you can't, there was a situation where they were paying proper production houses quite a large amount of money for the pages, and they weren't getting the good results because the production house didn't have that fan interest in making sure that book was as good as it possibly could be. And again, that's what Shaki's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd just like to thank whoever that was whose comment was, "Wow, Nicholas Briggs."
Lantern's own. There you go, Nick. You have fans here. Absolutely. So yeah, a few people asking about when it's available and all that sort of stuff. Nick, I know I said I'd keep you here 5 minutes, but you started talking to John and now you're stuck here. So we'll let you go in a minute.
So I'll send you out onto the moon later to go and have share a couple of hours with an alien.
I'll send the anti-static wig over for you so you can wear that.
That's the reason for those wigs, was it? They were anti-static.
Something radiation protection.
The men didn't wear them though, did they?
They were more disposable.
My hair came off.
So this book, for those that are asking, it's a hardback. It's 288 pages. You can pre-order it from this coming Friday. That's Friday the 29th. It is $29.99, the hardback presentation. And for the first week or until that first print run sells out, we will supply you with an official shadow patch as a gift to you as an early Christmas present.
You mean to me?
For you as well, yeah. But we are based on the Space 1999 technical manual. We are expecting that first print run to sell out, I suspect. So if you're interested, please do grab it. Yeah, it's a really weighty tome, and as I said at the beginning of this, it's litho print rather than digital. So we are doing a full print run, and it will be in glorious, beautiful quality. Richard James, you are too late for the purple wigs. They were up front. You should have arrived on time. Go and sit at the back of the class.
Richard James, actor and writer.
Yes, I know he's very famous, So, folks, if you have any other questions about this, do let us know. But it'll be available on the Gerry Anderson store. That's shop.gerryanderson.com from this Friday. Nick, your copy will be in the post, as will yours, John. In fact, they'll be shipping from the end of November. But otherwise, I'm afraid you will have to grab yours from the Gerry Anderson store on Friday.
In the meantime, I'll just read this. Oh, look.
You have a look through that.
I'll read what I've got left of this. Oh no, that's TV21. Do apologise.
That's the wrong one. And I'll just give you
a UFO in this. No,
a very quick flick through some of the preview images just while we round up things here. So thank you for joining us, all of you from all over the place. This is the first 2 volumes. The next one will be out early March, and we'll complete the Countdown TV Action UFO collection. We've got everything from the color strips, artist profiles, beautifully written by Shaki Visconti, which she's done just a marvelous job managing this whole thing and bringing it all together. A lovely kind of collection of nostalgic strips from across the board, as well as some context for the time, information about the artist who put these things together. Yes, if you are a UFO fan, then you could not want for any more, I suspect. So, Nick and John, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Nick, I know you're very distracted. You can go read TV Action. John, you can go read TV21. And I'm going to go and...
UFO artist.
You're both showing your age there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go off and read my anthology volume 1, the digital version, to give it the last proof. But it's looking beautiful. Again, Shaki, thank you for your amazing efforts on this. It looks fantastic. And we will say goodbye for now. Wish you a great evening, and look forward to this launching on Friday. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.